So let's jump into these. Let's talk about the first subtype, the dominant subtype of the ENTJ. What does this subtype look like? What are the characteristics, the careers they might choose, maybe some of the challenges they have, and we can then go a layer deeper.
Yeah. Okay. So the dominant ENTJ is the most, I would say, stereotypical ENTJ. This is the one that would like everything on the list that you read. And it's usually the sort of the picture that comes up in our minds when we think about this type. So some of the qualities and characteristics of this style, the dominant style, is that they're particularly ambitious, they're commanding, they're confident. They are the ones that typically or potentially rise to become institutional directors, political leaders, tycoons of industry. They really enjoy leading other people, and they tend to do it in more traditional domains like healthcare, media, politics, transportation, like things that are already well-established industries. They are good at getting in there and rising to the top. They have a very in-charge style, which is how we think about ENTJs. And so it's unsurprising that they would have some of these characteristics. They are outgoing, tough, analytical. They generally rely on a preset way of rapidly acting on anything that comes up. So they have strong executive skills. They have fast decision-making capacities, and they're really good at getting into action. And so their brain tends to be very efficient. It's almost like there's a bunch of preset switches, and when one of those, sort of brain patterns is necessary, they flip that one on and leaving the other ones off. So unlike other types that might bring in the whole brain to figure any problem out, this type is very efficient with their brain wattage. They're very good at going like, okay, this decision or this situation is going to require like this set of skills or this way of looking at it. So I'm going to flip that one on, give it full wattage, and then once done, turn it off. So that efficiency means that there's a bunch of energy to apply to whatever they turn their attention to.
I want to be careful about a distinction here. Are you saying that that is different than other personality types or other subtypes of the ENTJ personality?
It's different than other personality types, right? There is an even higher level of efficiency in brain wattage or like how one uses the mind than just about any other personality type. The other type that would probably come close is an ESTJ. But this dominant ENTJ, it's like they figured out how to leverage all of their energy and all of their brain wattage to focus on each problem as it arises and to get into action as fast as possible.
Gotcha. So this is the ENTJ that's most likely your boss. If you're not an ENTJ and you have an ENTJ you report to, most likely this is the ENTJ in your life that's in leadership that you may or may not feel good about, depending on your relationship and the context that you're in that pathway.
Right.
Or if this is you as an ENTJ, this means that you probably are the boss. You're probably the one that's in charge at the top, giving the orders, having things, you say what has to happen, then it goes and happens in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there can be, if a dominant ENTJ takes the time to learn the skills around it, they can be managers and leaders with great finesse, but not necessarily. The passion for leadership might not translate into finesse. They might just like doing it and want to do it and sort of push themselves into those positions.
Yeah.
And so when an ENTJ is good at it, they're fantastic. They're incredible managers and leaders, and people love them. And when they're not great at it, that's when people get these stereotypes in their head. And when they complain about the ENTJ, that was not so nice. But it can actually go either way. The subtype itself does not indicate the level of finesse, just the level of desire around leadership. So some of the positions that they tend to be attracted to are, business management is a big one. You read a list of things that were a lot of business and politically related things, like, a judge is, arguably a political position. But usually the domains they enjoy, so they're looking for leadership, but where? And it's usually things like advertising, the cognitive sciences, economics, education, games, media, and sales. So some more specifics are things like business executive has already been mentioned, but like an ad executive, sales manager, investment banker, hedge fund manager, consultant, and engineering are usually things that are very attractive.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I'm guessing that this subtype is not going to mistype very often because it's so quote unquote stereotypical of ENTJ.
Yeah. Like when you're pushing for maximum profits while focusing on rapid controlled growth, it's like, it's pretty easy to go. That might be somebody with ENTJ preferences.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a layer deeper for someone that's really into cognitive functions and personality type theory and all these things. The neurotransmitter of choice for the dominant ENTJ subtype is testosterone. Mm-hmm. And the two cognitive functions the ENTJ uses is extroverted thinking. We've nicknamed it effectiveness.
This is for the type geeks, by the way.
This is their driver or dominant cognitive function. This is how they make their decisions. What works in the outer world, what gets things done, managing resource. Well, they pair that with their auxiliary or co-pilot function of introverted intuition. We've nicknamed it perspectives. This is getting into somebody else's perspective, shifting perspectives into other people, looking down a long timeline and seeing probabilities, like the intuitive probabilities of something happening or not happening on a longer timeline.
Right.
And this is something that they use to perceive their world or take in information. And so that makes them intuitive. So these are their two front cognitive functions.
Right.
How are they attuned? Give us the overarching principle of attunement, and then specifically, how are they attuned for the dominant subtype of ENTJ?
All right. The reason why I interrupted you, though, is because I said we'll give people warning when we're going into type geek stuff. So let's make sure that we give
you
people
promised that. I didn't promise that.
Fair enough.
I just seemingly just slid right over there.
You're right. You made no promises. There's no, Joel said, no expectations. So again, for the type geeks, those two functions, extroverted thinking and introverted intuition, or effectiveness and perspectives, there is an orientation that each of them can have, which is called either analytic or holistic. Analytic is a more assertive, targeted, focused, like sort of almost has blinders on because they're so honed in on a particular way of looking at things through this lens. That's a more analytic version. And then there's also a holistic version, which is a little bit more open framed. It's not as focused. It's not as targeted. It's not as assertive in its energy. It's just a little bit more like sort of seeing a bigger picture, taking more into consideration. But it tends to be less assertive. So it has less executiveness to it, if that makes sense. For the dominant subtype, and by the way, we recorded a whole podcast with our friend Dr. Dario Nardi talking about how these subtypes work, and we went into analytic and holistic. And if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of it all, I highly recommend going and checking out that episode. It's fascinating. But for dominant ENTJs, both their preferred functions, both extroverted thinking effectiveness and introverted intuition or perspectives, they both have an analytic frame. They're both targeted, focused, assertive, and have an energy that's like very like forward movement and directing. And so that's unsurprising that the dominant ENTJ would be so like sort of targeted in almost everything they do.
Yeah, I think the word frame is a great word. Is an analytic oriented function in general would be less open to other people or other energies' frames. Mm-hmm. Their frame is the dominant framework.
Right.
Everybody else needs to match that. Whereas the holistic would be a little more diffused. They're open to other people's way of seeing things, a little more open to the other frames around them.
Yeah.
So more interoperability on the holistic side. So this is probably I don't want to say it this way, but this is the least cooperative ENTJ with others. They would love for you to cooperate with them, but if this is you as an ENTJ, you're probably needing people to get on your bus to do the thing that you've got in mind. You're focused on some goals, some things that you want to do, and you need to organize the troops, organize the resource, troops general, quote unquote troops, not literal troops, although those could be the case
literal
as well, and get this thing done.
Yeah.
Right? The thing that you see that needs to get done.
Yeah. Dario mentioned that sometimes people see this style of ENTJ even as like villainous because they're so focused and targeted. But at the same time, they also usually make a big impact.
Yeah.
And so this style of ENTJ, their career choice is important, not just for, to match their talents and interests, but also to help them hone some of the skill to bring in a little bit more finesse, a little bit more. Even if you're automating human-centered things, there is a capacity to get more refined at what you're doing. And so career choice is important.